One of the things that makes leftists so damned creepy, but also so effective, is their ability to rapidly adopt new lingo, replacing one word with some other nonsensical newspeak term, all at the same time. All together, they're able to do this virtually overnight. A word that we all had been using without issue suddenly becomes offensive, and some other term that was invented by leftist activists 19 seconds ago is put in its place. This process can happen so quickly that a word you said openly during breakfast might be a slur by the time you're sitting down for dinner. Meanwhile, a term that you never heard when you were eating breakfast might be ubiquitous by dinner time. Ubiquitous, at least in the media, pop culture, even if not among normal human beings. And think about how quickly gibberish like Latin X showed up on the scene and was adopted by our institutions. Or consider how the term person of color entered the vernacular and supplanted the previous PC favorite, African American. So we've seen this process play out many times, and now we have a chance to witness it once again. While discussing and reporting on, and very often lying about, the death of psychotic violent drifter Jordan Neely, the left has collectively embraced a new label to describe Neely's living conditions, or former living conditions to be precise. There was a time, a far less sensitive time, when he would have been described as a vagrant or a transient or a bum or a tramp. All these words have been used. All these descriptions, though, have long since been tossed on the linguistic ash heap. And we've settled eventually on homeless, which we all seem to agree sufficiently sort of captures the essence of the people who are living in this condition without being judgmental or insulting. A homeless person is a person without a home. Why don't they have a home? Is it their own fault that they're in this situation, or are they victims of circumstance, or is it some combination of the two? Well, the term homeless passes down no verdict on those questions and isn't intended to pass a verdict on that. The word is neutral on why and only seeks to describe the what. It's a fine word. It's a word that worked perfectly fine. We didn't need a new one, but now we have one anyway. See if you can spot the language shift as we run through a few media reports. So this is from Axios. Jordan Neely, an unhoused man, died after being placed in a chokehold by another New York subway train passenger during an apparent mental health episode. The Guardian. According to new accounts, Neely, who was unhoused and a known Michael Jackson impersonator, boarded a northbound F train and began screaming about his distress. Philadelphia Inquirer. Jordan Neely's death was ruled a homicide after an ex-Marine held him in chokehold on the subway. Now it's sparking discussions on mental health care for the unhoused. The Intercept says, the NYPD's treatment of a white man who strangled Jordan Neely, an unhoused black man, on the subway is not how things usually go down. USA Today, Neely had been arrested 42 times since 2013, including charges of assault and transit fraud, but that many were for minor violations like having an open container of alcohol. Authority says it appears Neely was unhoused. So you probably picked up on it. It's not exactly subtle. And Democratic politicians have adopted this terminology as well. Here's Representative Jamal Bowman on CNN last night. Listen.
As a black man watching the video, and I have to force myself to watch these videos because each time there's a new video, there's more trauma that I feel. Eric Gardner was choked to death. George Floyd had a knee on his neck. Philando Castile wasn't choked, but he was shot to death on video. And now Mr. Neely. And, I'm born and raised in New York. I rode the trains my entire life as a child. You often see people who are unhoused have episodes.
Yes, remember that the next time you make the mistake of boarding a New York City subway train, when you see a drug-addled homeless guy randomly assaulting and mugging a commuter, nothing to be concerned about. It's just a person who is unhoused having an episode. Unhoused. Right? The memo has gone out. Unhoused is the new Latinx. It's the hot new PC lingo on the market. And you want to get in on the action before it changes again, because yesterday the word was homeless. Today it's unhoused. Tomorrow it might be, dehoused. Then it will be person of an unhoused persuasion. Then eventually habitation challenged. And they'll realize that all this sounds far too negative still. And they'll want a term that sends the message that homeless people aren't really homeless at all. It's just that they don't have one single home in a fixed location, right? Their home is everywhere. It changes. And they'll start using terms like house fluid and dwelling expensive. That's where this leads. But for now, unhoused is the new trendy thing. President Trump recently issued a warning from his Mar-a-Lago home, quote, Our currency is crashing and will soon no longer be the world standard, which will be our greatest defeat, frankly, in 200 years. There are three reasons the central banks are dumping the U.S. dollar: inflation, deficit spending, and our insurmountable national debt. The fact is, there is one asset that has withstood famine, wars, and political and economic upheaval dating back to biblical times, and that is gold. I've bought gold from Birch Gold in preparation for uncertain economic times, and you can trust them too. You should do the same. You can own gold in a tax-sheltered retirement account with the help of Birch Gold. That's right. Birch Gold will help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold. The best part is you don't pay a penny out of pocket. When currencies fail, gold is a safe haven. How much more time does the dollar have? Protect your savings with gold. Birch Gold has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and thousands of happy customers. You can find out why by texting Walsh to 989898 and get your free info kit on gold. Again, text Walsh to 989898 today. The first step in growing up and being a real man is getting off your parents' phone plan. Getting your own cell phone plan gives you a sense of independence and responsibility. It's a step towards becoming more self-sufficient. By paying for your own finances, you learn how to budget and manage your money. There are a ton of cell phone providers out there. Unfortunately, most of them want to lock you into horrific contracts and will tack on hidden fees at any chance they get. That's why I'm a huge fan of Pure Talk. There are no contracts, no hassle, and you can cancel at any time. Pure Talk uses the same nationwide networks as major carriers, so you'll get the same reliable coverage you're used to. They offer a range of cell phone plans that best fit your budget and your needs. You can get unlimited talk, text, and plenty of data for just $30 a month. Switching over to Pure Talk is so easy. You can make the switch. You can keep your cell phone number. You can keep your phone number. All of that is very easy to do with their U.S. customer service team. You can make the switch in as little as 10 minutes. Pure Talk is so sure you're going to love your service. They're going to offer a money-back guarantee, 100% money-back guarantee. You can't get that anywhere. So go to puretalk.com, enter promo code Walsh to save 50% off your first month. That's puretalk.com, promo code Walsh. Pure Talk. It's simply smarter wireless. Why is unhoused preferable to homeless? Well, the website unhoused.org makes the case this way. It explains, quote, the label of homeless has derogatory connotations. It implies that one is less than, and it undermines self-esteem and progressive change. The use of the term unhoused instead has a profound personal impact upon those in insecure housing situations. It implies that there is a moral and social assumption that everyone should be housed in the first place. Well, how in God's name does the word unhoused come with moral and social assumptions that don't also apply to homeless, which literally means exactly the same thing? An article in Architectural Digest tries to flesh that out a little bit. It explains, quote, in Los Angeles, Mayor Eric Garcetti and some members of the city council have embraced unhoused. In Seattle, the city government uses the phrase person experiencing homelessness. The word homeless has become inseparable from a toxic narrative that blames and demonizes people who are unhoused, according to Eve Garrow, homelessness policy analyst and advocate for the American Civil Liberties Union of Southern California. Wait on a second. The word homeless is dehumanizing, says the homelessness policy analyst. All right. The term is increasingly used in a way where it implies someone is dangerous or devious, she said, or deviant. As a result, a less charged term is more apt. At the same time, a related term to homelessness, the homeless, has begun to be seen as othering. In May 2020, the Associated Press updated its style book to focus on person-first language. It said not to use the homeless, calling it a dehumanizing term, and instead use terms like homeless people or people without housing. You see, homeless is offensive enough, but if you put the word the in front of it, suddenly becomes even more offensive. That word the, very offensive word. Why is that exactly? And how can you change the narrative around a certain concept by simply swapping out one term for a synonymous term? And if attaching the word less to a person, homeless, has the effect of diminishing them somehow, then wouldn't it have the same effect to attach the prefix un? I mean, in what way is unhoused substantially or definitionally different from homeless? The answer, of course, is that it isn't different. The change is entirely arbitrary and meaningless, and that is exactly the point. If there is any real meaning behind the terminology swap, it's in the fact that unhoused sounds slightly more passive, I guess, than homeless. It sounds even more like something that would happen to a person without their involvement, really. As if they walked outside one day and turned around to shut the door and their house vanished. I've become unhoused. What happened to my house? The left seeks to remove the elements of personal agency and free will from all societal problems, especially homelessness or unhousedness. They don't want us to notice or acknowledge the fact that many homeless people are mentally ill, yes, and many of them are mentally ill because their brains have been destroyed by drugs, and their brains were destroyed by drugs because they made the decision at some point in the past to start using drugs. Now, I'm sure that a large percentage of the homeless suffered misfortunes in their lives outside of their control. We all have. But personal choice has also played a heavy role in many of these cases. A person who makes good choices will almost certainly not end up homeless, except in very rare circumstances. The left constantly calls for nuanced conversations, but this is the actual nuance in the homeless conversation, and they refuse to acknowledge it. Okay, the unnuanced view of homelessness is that they're all victims, and that's it. That's the mainstream view, that's the acceptable view, that's the view without nuance. Well, they're all victims. The nuance is to realize that, well, that's not always the case. We're not allowed to see the homeless as anything but pure helpless victims through and through, though. There is no nuance to the picture that they paint. And that is partly what this unhoused stuff is all about, but that's all kind of secondary. Because even if unhoused has a slightly more passive, more helpless tone to it, the distinction is still mostly arbitrary, and the arbitrariness is the point most of all. As always, we find ourselves unwillingly in this giant game of cultural Simon Says, where they come up with new rules, new concepts, new language, and we're meant to follow along out of pure obedience. Now, I think I've used the analogy before of the prison warden in the movie Cool Hand Luke, who demands that Luke dig a giant hole and then fill it back in again. And that there's no point to the hole except to dig it. There's no point to digging it except to break Luke's spirit and get him accustomed to following orders. The fact that the order was arbitrary, that there was no reason to dig the hole, that the task assigned was so pointless, that's what made it an effective form of conditioning. It's one thing to use arguments to persuade someone to adjust their language or their behavior. It's another thing if you compel them to adjust their language and behavior, even if they haven't been persuaded. Okay, when you can get people to speak a certain way, even when they don't see any reason why they should be. Like, why can't I say this word? Why is this word better? Doesn't matter, just say it. Get people to go along with that. And there's a lot more power in that. And that is the truly sinister agenda behind this language policing that on the surface always seems so laughable and ridiculous. Which isn't to say that it isn't laughable and ridiculous, of course. And that is why, ultimately, the term unhoused is today canceled. That'll do it for this portion of the show. As we move over to Members Block. Become a member today by using code Walsh at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. Hope to see you there. If not, talk to you on Monday. Godspeed.